at the bus stop that I was picked up by my trafficker at. We're in the spot it happened. Just where my life was pretty much turned upside down. Just by getting in somebody's car. Human trafficking happens all around us. We don't even notice it. It's happening at this bus stop. I think about that girls are being dropped off and picked up here all the time, and if I don't make a difference now, who will? If we don't take the responsibility on ourselves, then who are we expecting to do it? For me, if somebody said they cared about me, it would have been enough. This was the bus I was supposed to get on, actually. This exact one, the 201A. This one goes all the way up to my aunt and uncle's house. Girls who were trying to leave their family, and he didn't care what race they were. He didn't care about any of that kind of stuff. For him, it was just money. It was just money.
Human trafficking is the exploitation of human beings for either the purposes of commercial sex or forced labor, and the trafficker uses force, fraud, or coercion to actually make money off of that person's back. Human trafficking is modern day slavery, and these victims find themselves in situations that they literally cannot get out of. Force is anything that you can imagine when that word comes into your head, right? It's the beatings, the burnings, the rape, the gang rape. Victims have been shot, they've been knifed, they've been mutilated and tortured in absolutely horrendous ways. I mean, anything that trafficker can think of to make that victim comply and obey the trafficker, that's what he or she will do.
Coercion might be physical threats to that person or maybe their family. They may be threatened with some sort of, let's say, deportation, or perhaps even legal threats where they'll tell a woman, you must continue to prostitute for me, you must continue to go out there and earn me money, otherwise I'm going to call ACS and have them take your baby away because you're a prostitute. The fraud, of course, we deal with a lot, especially with teenagers. They're promised a job. They're promised some sort of romantic interest. They're promised a completely new life or escape or shelter. They don't realize what they're walking into.
The day that I met my trafficker, I was going back to my aunt and uncle's house to sleep for the night, and then the next day I was getting on a Greyhound bus to go to Ohio. She asked me if I wanted to come party, and I remember looking them up and down, and he looked like he was really young. He was smiling, and he was wearing semi-nice clothes, but definitely not what you think of as like typical pimp clothes. She looked like she was younger than me. I thought if she was younger than me and she was safe, then it's probably an okay person. I told them about my Greyhound bus, and they said, well, how are you getting to the Greyhound bus? And I said, I have to take 4 local buses starting at 7 o'clock in the morning to get to this Greyhound station at 1. He said, well, why don't we just go pick up your stuff from your house? You can come here, you can sleep for a couple of hours, and then we'll drive you there. When I woke up, he was gone, and I started to freak out. He walked in 4 minutes before the Greyhound bus was supposed to leave. I picked up my stuff and we drove down the road. At 1:30, I was just like, stop, we missed the bus. I was really trying to figure out what I was gonna do. And he's telling me this spiel about, oh, we'll get you nice clothes, we'll feed you, you can stay here, but you need to work with us for just 2 weeks, so we'll give you $500 to leave with. I knew what he was talking about. I knew that he was talking about prostitution. So that night I was trafficked for the first time. It was March 10th, 2014. Once the 2 weeks had ended, I did ask him if I could leave. He said, well, your family hasn't even called about you. They clearly don't really care about you. We care about you. How do you know this friend in Ohio cares about you? And so he manipulated me and to staying longer. When the manipulation stopped working, he got physical. By the time the last 2 months I was there, I was getting beaten every 3 hours or so. He waterboarded me, he pistol whipped me, he played Russian roulette with me, he electrocuted me, he beat me with metal poles. So he was very violent, and the fear of dying kept growing as the beatings got worse and worse, to the point where I just thought that was the way I was gonna die. He would take us here every morning after we got off of work. He would usually have Karaya run in there, look around, and then if she saw a girl that she thought was a good target, then he would park the car and come in and talk to her. And sometimes he talked to her for hours. And sometimes I would get in the car and come home with us. And he was just looking for vulnerable girls that were down on their luck and really were lost, just like I was. And so he would come here to find them. He said it was a perfect place.
When we think about how many passengers actually take buses, I mean, it's hundreds of millions of passenger trips annually here in the United States. Think about all of those points of intersection the bus industry actually has with potential victims. You may find yourself in a position where you are able to actually have a conversation with a potential victim, and they open up to you a little bit, and you starting to hear some things that don't add up.
I had a boy that was learning disabled, and he basically missed a transfer bus, and he wound up in my office. And a woman kept calling, identifying herself as his aunt. The aunt had explained that this young man's mother was a crack addict and unable to take care of him, and that she had arranged for his transportation using a bus service from Georgia up to New York. I called up the local sheriff's department down in Georgia to make contact with anyone who knew who the legal guardian was of this boy. I wound up speaking to a court employee who happened to know the family, knew the mother very well, gave me the telephone number. I spoke to the mother directly, and she explained that her son was learning disabled and had been approached by this person online who was trying to get him to come up to New York. She was working for a pimp who was running a brothel that specialized in underage boys. A bus employee thought that they were doing the right thing, that they were helping a kid out. The problem is the bad guys will always take advantage of our sympathies. They're always going to tell us a story to get what they want, and what they want are these kids.
Trafficking happens on all forms of transportation. Airplanes, cross-country buses to local buses. I've seen it in both forms on a Greyhound that was coming from Los Angeles to Sacramento, and I've seen it on the local buses. And usually the perpetrator is watching from the distance, not really interacting with the victim when they're on the buses together. But sometimes they'll send the girls by themselves, and they're expected to make a certain amount of money before they can come home, wherever that might be.
It's not as if we have stringent security for who's coming on a bus. Sometimes if they have an adult put them on a bus, that's enough. Nobody really asks any question. But nobody's really asking who's the adult that's putting this kid on a bus? Or sometimes, who is this adult that's picking this kid up off the bus? Or is there an adult that's picking this kid up off the bus? Now, some bus companies have stricter regulations, but a lot don't. We constantly depend on drivers and dispatchers, traffic agents, control agents to alert us to this.
You know what's normal. You know what normal behavior looks like on your bus. What if two people come up and one is not allowed to speak freely? The other one does all the talking, most likely older than the individual not allowed to speak. The individual not allowed to speak doesn't have an ID on them because most likely the trafficker is holding it for them. There's a fearful demeanor, most likely. This person is just uncomfortable being with this other individual. Do you actually see any outward signs of bruising? Traffickers won't necessarily always be sitting by their victims. It could be behind them, it could be to the side, somewhere else in the bus, and yet they're obsessively watching them. They're controlling that person through bodily cues. What if you work in a terminal and you notice day in and day out, or even weekly, right, that there's a car that comes and the person that comes and is kind of strolls the terminal never really gets on to ride a bus, but instead that individual is always approaching young girls, girls that look a little out of place, girls that look potentially vulnerable. And this individual is always coming up and talking to the girls. And even at times he's gotten the girls to come with him. And so paying attention for those signs of pimp control is absolutely key if you're a terminal employee.
If I was a bus stop employee, I would call the police and I would maybe try and stop her and say something like, "I just want to make sure everything's all right," or something like that, something along those lines to make sure that girl knows that she is being watched over. I didn't feel like I was cared for by anyone.
Bad guys are always out there. They're always working, they're always looking. It's only right that good people do the same. You know, keep their eyes out for people to help, to do one small thing, and that's make a call.
I had 12 surgeries. I had 28 broken bones, lacerations to my liver, my kidney, and my spleen. I was internally bleeding from my spleen. I had 1/3 of my blood. There was a month of hospitalization. I was able to get the social workers and my family to work together to get me out of the Las Vegas hospital, and I was medically evac'd to California. He was calling the hospital and seeing if I was still there and stuff like that, so I was really scared being there. So I got out of the hospital in the beginning of August. I gave my statement in the middle of August, and then middle of September he was picked up. He had multiple charges. He had sex trafficking, he had assault with the use of deadly weapon, first-degree kidnapping. He was found guilty on all 15 charges, and he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
To call up a family and say, you know, your daughter that's been missing, she's in my office right now, she's alive, and she wants to come home. And that's an amazing feeling, it's an amazing gift. You provided a miracle for a family, but unless people get involved, that miracle doesn't happen.
Each of us can be on the lookout. Each of us can be paying attention to these red flags. and hopefully make a call that leads to saving a life.